Briahna, what's on your radar?
I don't know how to sugarcoat this, Robbie, so I'll just say it. It seems clear that the Democratic Party is over. I saw the writing on the wall and left after the Obama years. He was probably the best the party had to offer, and he revealed himself to be a truly disappointing character. You could drive a Bronco through the gap between his campaign promises and reality. And 14 years after he promised hope and change, we still have no campaign finance reform, Roe isn't codified. And instead of using his incredible political gifts to advance the interests of the communities he was supposed to represent, he's now angling to buy a basketball team. I guess it's easier to crush a future strike if you own a franchise. Now, that's not to say he did nothing. It's meaningful, truly, to not be denied health insurance because of a pre-existing condition. It matters that 35 million Americans got insurance in the first place through the ACA. But it wasn't enough. I was hopeful that an independent senator from Vermont might right the ship. Bernie stood up to Barack Obama when he threatened to cut Social Security. He truly was unbought by corporate money and was willing to call out the banks that destroyed American homeowners in 2008, even while Barack Obama was consulting with those banks to pick his cabinet. But even Bernie failed to take the type of stand that could have rescued poor and working class people from the corporate duopoly. Push come to shove, when he should have been fighting for our lives at the start of a pandemic, he told America that Biden would be a good president, that he wasn't corrupt, and he endorsed him within days of dropping out of the race, declining to even withhold his endorsement for anything at all. The populist left is such a non-entity that it couldn't go 24 hours without bending the knee to liberal know-nothings, withdrawing a letter, the most milquetoast critique of Biden's policy toward Russia-Ukraine. The letter didn't ask to withdraw aid at all. It merely asked, Oliver Twist style, please, may I have some peace? And progressives still couldn't stick the landing. But despite all of that, libs are gearing up to blame powerless progressives for what they anticipate will be a disastrous midterm result. Here's Chuck Todd this week on MSNBC.
If Democrats come up short in some of these places, I think there's going to be a lot of finger pointing. Progressives are going to take some heat for forcing some certain nominees in certain states that may have been less electable than other nominees could have been, the defund the police movement, all of this.
I'm sorry, which precarious Democratic candidate said they wanted to defund the police? Was it Fetterman, the guy who famously chased down a black man vigilante style at gunpoint because he thought he'd committed a crime? He hadn't committed a crime. Or Stacey Abrams, who after, flirting with actual progressivism for about half a second, has run hard on fund the police harder, even though it's probably costing her black male votes in Georgia? Midterms haven't even happened yet, and the Democratic Party gatekeepers, whose purpose is to run cover for the complete and total political malfeasance of liberals, are already in excuse-making mode. Their diagnosis of why Dems are flailing, same as always. Somehow, it's progressives' fault. The blame, however, lies squarely at Biden's feet. For one, he's done next to nothing about inflation, punting action to the Fed, which acts independently and whose only plan is to purposefully cause a recession by raising interest rates. In an article published yesterday in Vox, reporter Rachel Cohen asks, is the cure for inflation worse than the disease? The Federal Reserve's interest rate hikes mean 1.2 million people will become unemployed by the end of 2023. Others estimate that number could be as high as 3.2 million Americans out of a job. Quote, I wish there was a less painful way to do that, said Fed Reserve Chair Jay Powell. There isn't. Oh, well, I guess. Sucks to be you. The pain is the point, by the way. They are trying to slow down consumption by literally taking away your salary. The super consuming rich, though, no one's trying to curb their consumption. No, a wealth tax is firmly off the table, as are the types of interventions Europeans have fought for and secured, like a cap on energy prices. Biden's flacks say, don't blame him. He did the Inflation Reduction Act, but the Inflation Reduction Act was fact-checked by the Congressional Budget Office, and guess what? It basically does nothing to reduce inflation. And although the Democratic lawmakers introduced a bill in May that would seek to address one of the roots of the problem, banning price gouging, it hasn't passed the Senate and won't pass the Senate with the current congressional composition, a composition that, if polls are to be believed, is only going to get worse, redder, next year. It's no wonder then that Republicans are considered to be better than Democrats on inflation, even though their stated plan consists of cutting Social Security and Medicare. After all, how can it get any worse? We know the main driver of inflation is corporate greed. California populist Katie Porter made this case before Congress last week, and a fact check by the Economic Policy Institute and the Roosevelt Institute proved her right. Quote, a large portion of price increases are going to profits for larger corporations and services like groceries, furniture, and cars. Katie Porter's charts don't lie. But what are Dems going to do about it? Nothing. They will barely even talk about it. The price of a bag of Snickers has more than doubled, Bernie tweeted recently, but Republicans want to give the Mars family, who became 44% richer during the pandemic and are now worth $106 billion, a tax break of up to $42 billion by repealing the estate tax. Nice tweet, but without the message discipline to make sure anyone not terminally online sees it, it doesn't exist in the Democratic Party. Good thing they've been spending so much energy messaging about saving democracy. This is a moment for real, independent, populist progressives to stand up to the plate, but they're nowhere to be found. This week, AOC ignored the progressive media that put her on the map, choosing once again to speak on a large liberal platform for people who like her as far as she's a young, articulate Latina who doesn't criticize Biden too much. During her Pod Save America interview, she said a number of insightful things that were, in fact, an accurate diagnosis of what Democrats are doing wrong. And you should listen to that full interview. There's good stuff in there, but she also said this.
Special interests. Our entire political system is designed to be very, very acquiescent to money. And the difference is that Republicans, that is part of Republican ideology, is to support corporate America. I think the Democratic Party, we really struggle because we're supposed to be the party of the working class. But in reality, there's a lot in our big tent. It's highly segmented. And I think that there is a lot of objections from that within our party, which prevents us from being as forceful on these issues as we can be.
This is the problem with left electeds. They're often spot on and even more often are so close to saying something true, but then miss. Look, our politics are being killed by special interests, both Republicans and Democrats. But AOC weirdly pivots when she gets to the Democrats, saying that the real struggle, after saying that the Republicans have this problem with special interests, that the real struggle for Democrats is the party's diversity. The problem, she says, is that we're a big tent. I mean, give me a break. How can alienated voters, of which there are a huge and growing number, begin to understand that they should be following you? That left populism offers more than right populism. That you have real solutions if you refuse to call out your own party as bought and sold too. She used to call Dems out. It was why we loved her. But if this is the best the Democrats have to offer, I have to think that there's no hope. Look, I'm not optimistic, but I hope to God that the Forward Party, the Green Party, or even Libertarians can get their act together and figure out how to mount a real challenge to the two-party duopoly, because things are looking bleak. We're in a world where the right offers up a fake social conservative who's been alleged to pay for multiple abortions while he's simultaneously playing the choir boy. And the liberals are offering up a fracking-loving vigilante who likes to citizens arrest black men in his spare time. And neither of them, for very different reasons that engender very different levels of empathy, can really articulate their platform, much less inspire the kind of political revolution this country needs. We are on a precipice, and I, for one, am scared, and I'm tired, and I'm seeing protests getting more and more extreme on both sides of the aisle, and honestly, even though I disagree with some of the choices people are making, I get it. Riots, after all, are the language of the unheard, both on 1/6 and during the George Floyd protests. We have everything we need to truly make America great again. The people were never the problem. The problem has always been elite gatekeepers. Will anyone stand up and show the people how much power we really have? Or do I have to look forward to the Herschel versus Fetterman ticket or Herschel versus Fetterman in 2028?
Oh, I hope not.
I mean, I know that we talked about that debate a little bit yesterday, and some people seem to have come away with the impression that I thought that Fetterman did a good job. No, that's not the point. The point is that it doesn't matter if Fetterman does a good job or if Herschel Walker is a complete hypocrite. Nothing matters other than that people want control of the Senate. Republicans want their people in control. Democrats want their people in control. And there's good reasons for that on both sides, for ideological reasons. And so increasingly, the quality of the candidate just doesn't matter. You've made your critiques of Republicans making bad candidate choices and not having these downstream effects and making this a closer race, a closer midterm battle than it needs to be. But the real people suffering here are the American people who increasingly have no one that's actually reflecting their interests in Congress.
Yeah, I wish it mattered more. As I actually do. I like some Republicans better than others. I like some Democrats better than others. Actually, on the Republican side, there is some. Well, on both sides, there are differences in views and intellectual traditions. The Republicans are going through such a transformation right now to a more worker-friendly part. I don't roll your eye. Who does corporate America prefer these days? It's Democrats.
It's not.
It's Democrats.
I don't know, maybe vibes.
Democrats
maybe based
are becoming
wait a minute, Robbie. Maybe based on vibes and like whoever says something is woke or something. But if you look at open secrets and look at who these corporations are giving to, they now, as always, are giving equally
Hillary
Republican
Clinton.
and Democratic. Hillary Clinton's not running for office, Robbie.
Well,
they're now, as always,
better than.
They're now, as always, giving to both parties in equal measure. There are certain industries that favor Republicans, oil and gas, those kinds of industries, and there's certain industries that slightly favor Democrats. But all of these corporations give to both parties because no matter who wins, they win and the people lose. And that's the point. We have to stop fighting this left-right game. I'm not interested in playing Republicans are marginally worse than Democrats. That's a liberal's game. I'm not a liberal.
Well, okay, it's easy to say we have to start fighting this left-right game, but we have to vote for every Democrat no matter what because they are Democrats.
I don't vote for Democrats. That's the whole point. I opened this thing saying I haven't voted for a Democrat since Barack Obama. That's not my bag. My frustration is that I feel like every time...
I'm voting for Republicans since Ron Paul in the primaries.
I feel like every time that I criticize Democrats, I criticize liberals, but I feel and there are meaningful differences here, right? Like I don't want there to be a federal ban on abortion. So like I completely understand people who want to sign up and vote for Fetterman or vote for whomever. But at some point there has to be a break. At some point, progressives need to try to take over the Democratic Party the way that Trump and Trumpism has taken over the Republican Party, or someone like Andrew Yang needs to figure out that they need that where they're needed is not to create another corruptible party, but to really say we're not going to take the corporate dollars that have made both parties so beholden to corporate interest in Wall Street and actually chart a new path that people like myself, disaffected people, can actually feel comfortable joining.
Look, I've said this before. I think it matters what the progressive policy we're talking about is. I think you concede this or agree with this to some degree, that cultural, social, progressive issues are not broadly popular.
And they're also not the subject of federal policy making.
Many economic progressive issues, if presented a certain way, are popular, I would say. The word socialism is not popular, Marxism is not popular, but giving, which I'm not opposed to giving people who need help more help, et cetera. You can phrase it in such a way that these are popular policies. I can see that.
And here's the thing about the social stuff. There's no federal social policy. There's the Democrats aren't trying to
No, that's not true. What the some DEI stuff, some gender and race stuff is administrative. It's by the education department and the. You mean
the advisory letter that Obama sent to don't let people use the bathrooms that they want? That advisory letter is what you're comparing to.
It came this close to abolishing the concept of female sports. This close.
I'm sorry. I can't get into that with you right now. I'm not going to do this. We just did a block. People can't pay their bills. We're about to talk about learning loss. One of the drivers of learning loss, something like over 100,000 kids in New York City were homeless. People in the New York City public school system were homeless last year. We have millionaires and billionaires making more money than they ever have in American history. With the pandemic, where people were suffering, being a period of time where they earned even more. There's corporate price gouging, and we can't even have a single bloody person in Congress bring up a wealth tax in this moment. The so-called progressives can't stand their ground and talk about ending endless wars for 2 seconds without bending the knee. And so I want to have a conversation about that. And I promise you, I'm not bringing up cultural issues. I don't care. Keep it to yourself. Fight it for it on your local level. Do whatever you want. You can do what you want with the trans girl in Nebraska. Mm-hmm. I can't have any control over that. That's not my job. I pray for her, and I hope that she's able to live a safe and happy life, because I know that that's not how everybody feels in this country, and that really is a bummer. But things are so dire. We have to be able to focus on the big issues, because the people who are in charge are depending on us not doing that.
Well, keeping schools open, I agree, is a big issue, but that does impugn specifically Democratic policy priority. Fine, not even on the cultural front, on a kind of social or economic front. Those were Democratic priorities that the people are very frustrated with.
I think schools should be open, and I think that they should have ventilation systems, and masks should be available.
They got billions of dollars to do so. They didn't actually. I was looking at there was a fascinating. We didn't talk about it. Maybe we should have. There's a great Washington Post story on how so much of the money schools got, they didn't even bother spending.
Yeah, and those are the things that we should be united on pushing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's going to be harder for us to get any of those things enacted going forward. And it's a bleak time.
We'll have more Rising right after this. Stay with us.